urban creatures. I wrote a series of poems about urban creatures, city animals, animals that have adapted to our wayward way of living, and that's a part of this book. It could have been a chapbook on its own, really, but it's somewhere in the middle. I won't be reading from that because, excuse me, they all kind of losing my voice, all kind of are connected. They're like strung together. But to start with, I'm going to, yeah, I grew up in a refugee Mennonite village. Some of you may not know, you may all know what that is. It was Yarrow, actually, which is still kind of a neat place. But there was a lot of trauma there, and my parents escaped, fled Russia as teenagers with their families. I think my dad barely made it. There was a huge famine. And, well, as a friend has noted, there are probably a lot of descendants of rape victims here in Abbotsford. It was brutal. So I'm just going to start with one, and this is about our grandfather, and then I'll move on. Petrus Martens, he was a teacher in Russia, and this is the story that our father told us. Stories our father told us, passed down to these tame times, legends, fables, myths. Words are hostage to memory. Petrus, our grandfather, dreamer, schoolteacher, believer, and in Bolshevik Russia, these things were criminal. They came for him in their ragged rage. They stood him, said our father, against the house and raised their rifles. In that moment, those precious seconds, how dear this life, how filled with voice and snow and sleep and endless skies. And the love of a neighbor who pulled on a party uniform. This one's all right, he said. He's not rich, he cares for the children. Rifles were lowered. This time, they said, this time. Then boots, curses, hoofbeats, and they were gone. Silence. That same night they abandoned their home, fled to Moscow, found a new and restless home overseas. All untrue, says the youngest son. Perhaps, but he wasn't there. And in these tame times, this story of mercy dropped into our hands whispers from those before. I have my cat joining in here. I would like to ask her for a glass of water, but she won't do it for me. So the the village where I grew up, for little children was idyllic. I mean, they kicked us. This is probably a common experience in much of North America. They'd kick you out in the morning and say, "Come back for dinner," right? But it was just perfectly safe there, and it wasn't great for teenagers because of there were things wrong as well. But for children, it was great. And I still live in the valley. I did move away for a while. And this next little poem is my shot of anger about what they're doing to us. And some creatures still know how to find home here. The mountains slashed and leveled for human comfort. Our concrete valley. The green receding, diminishing daily, deer fleeing to distant hills, birdsong quieter with each dawning. And the hungry haul of traffic, our city growing obese as she swallows life and limb. But the crows, crafty creatures, we watching them at nightfall, their silent voyage back to where their day began. the familiar tree and branch and leaf, where they will sleep, where they are home. All right, I'm going to throw in a very brief one here. I notice his face isn't on the screen, but he and I went to a Wilco concert a few years ago with Jeff Tweedy's the front man. And he's as much a poet as a pop musician. Um, he's an amazing man, really. Very caring fellow. And towards the end of the concert, he spoke to the audience and said, "You know, pop bands come here and they say we're so pleased to be in Vancouver, and really they don't give a damn. they're just they're just here to make money, you know." But there was a lot of merch being sold, and I wasn't going to buy a $40 T-shirt. But Jeff Tweedy had a book on sale, poetry for $15. That's the value of poetry, I guess. And he wrote a number of prayers in it, what he calls prayers, and they're really almost stream of consciousness little things. You have to swallow them in one bite, like sushi, kind of. And so this is prayer number 5, and it's very quick. It might not make much sense logically, it's just there. Light a candle, curse the darkness. Let's meet in the middle at the shadow lines, bisecting our nation. Light a candle for the addict returning to an empty house, to an empty glass, chaos and community, and all the crazy betweens, shadow lines. I may choose to live there, where the fissure runs. Let's drink to that. Let's light a candle to my zigzag life. Okay, we'll move. This book it's kind of in an arc. Um, it starts with exile, and I believe it ends with some kind of hope, if hope is available to us. I think it's there if we want it. The book does move. Um, but there's a section of stories. I've written a lot of story poems, and I think they're easy to listen to. And I'm going to read one of them now. Candice has heard this one. And I was in Reno many years ago, and it was one of the most boring experiences I've ever had. Man, did I hate it. And I was there with a few friends, and I think they enjoyed it, but they were gamblers. White Nights, this one is called. Okay, I'll just read. After 3 days, I was saturated with the boredom of it all. Reno, the one-armed bandits, catatonic gamblers, the clink and chink of coin, the booze, the bad jokes, and terminally unfunny comedians, the entertainment that could be endured only through a drunken haze, the scan-clad girls slinging drinks, the buzz of inane conversation, the wins, far more the losses, the lights, the perpetual lights, turning the night white, and the gamblers white too, spending their savings on things they wouldn't remember. Alone, I paced my way back through sudden darkness to my Econo motel. I could hear the faint thump thump at my back. I had turned to flee the clamor, or so I thought. At the crosswalk, I hesitated, stopped. A car was making errant moves. Young black guys crowded inside, windows open. "Hey, Whitey's afraid we're gonna run him down." Titters, blasts of laughter. I stared straight ahead. They drove on. The white nights of Reno. I had carried them with me. I was Whitey incarnate. I was pink, really, but there's no racial slur for pink. I was the tourist they envied, the rich dude they hated with all their hearts. I wonder if they've survived, if they've gone on to better, if there are crosswalks where Whitey won't grab them by the balls. All right, and I'll just close here with a couple more. They're near the end of the book. um, we're getting into, yeah, my Mennonite ethnic community. I mean, they went through so much, especially the women. The women were the rocks, and I think we were aware of that. They're the ones who held the families together. A lot of the men had been shot or taken anyway, so the women took over back in Russia. And in World War II, they led the trek out, and thousands died. Elsie knows all about it. She's written about it. I can't recommend her book more. It's quite beautiful. It was horrible, but they made it here. And anyway, Mennonites had this. They developed this characteristic of surviving despite everything, and sometimes they did that in terrible ways, in controlling ways, and in condemning ways. But there were treasures among them as well, and I think we all have to know our past if we want to. You know, the generations today, it's like a tree being expected to grow branches without roots. And if we don't know where we came from, we're not going to know how to make a future. Okay, that's my sermon for today. Resurrection between the lines. It's more urban creatures, really. After the cruel months of snow, rain, and fog, they emerge. They've persisted somewhere, somehow. New nests, winged formations across the sky, birdsong, mating, and the damp earth welcoming. This miracle of universal return, don't explain it. Let it be touched by wonder. He has built a cellular wall against it. Click and tweet of protection. There's nothing for him outside. Yet, after the cruel months of birth, of death, he emerges. He's persisted through liquor and platitudes. Flights of love around him. He can't explain it. And walls too. And rainy nights. And one more. I'll just read the very last poem. If we have time, maybe one more later, but we can just talk. It's the very last one. I don't know if it's among my best writing, but it's really accessible, and it's kind of like a footnote to the book in itself. And it's called Sometimes. It's kind of a plea to, let's stop shouting at each other. And my Lord, big wars and big lies. A couple of weeks ago, I heard somebody from Ukraine. She lives in Zaporizhia, and she's doing work over there for a nonprofit. She opened her little talk by saying, "Don't feel any pity for me. That's the worst thing you can do." Even though she's watching her phone for incoming missiles and drones and wondering where she could hide if they come in. And she said, "Suffering is my teacher." You know, how do you explain people like that? Where does that come from? Sometimes. Sometimes I think, what's the point? Sometimes our born brutality, our love of violence, of war, of abuse, of indifference. Does anyone care? What's the point? The few of us, the rage against the machine. What's the point on a globe where only big counts, big battles, big politics, big money? And sometimes that's the lie. There is a point. We can step into the day. Small, steady steps. We can feed and clothe the least of these. We can love minute by minute. And I'll stop there.